Welcome to the Health Catalyst podcast, brought to you by YPO. Here we talk about the business of health innovation, and I sit down with industry leaders who have been in the trenches. My goal is to share the lessons and provide practical and actionable advice to help you launch, grow, and scale your business. I am your host, Rodrigo Hute. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is Andrew Lacy. Andrew is the founder and CEO of Prenuvo, a super exciting health technology company in the medical imaging and radiology industry, best known for its full-body MRI scans. And Prenuvo's objective is to detect potential health issues early before symptoms appear. I was sharing with Andrew just recently that I recently completed my first MRI at Prenuvo, and I had a fantastic experience, so I highly recommend it. I'll be sharing a little bit about my experience later on during the interview. But for now, I just wanted to say, Andrew, thank you so much for being here today, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Rodrigo. It's awesome to be here. Excited to dive in.
Yeah, me too. So just a little bit about Prenuvo, sharing some numbers, and please correct me if this is still accurate. Prenuvo has 17 clinics across the US. It's the largest provider, the largest private radiology group with over 80 certified radiologists globally. And as far as I know, you have conducted over 100,000 scans so far. Is that correct?
I think so. There might be another clinic or two since we last published that, and certainly we've scanned more patients. But we're definitely the biggest provider of whole body screening services anywhere in the world, and we've been doing this now since. In fact, the first scan we did was in 2009, but have been growing a lot in the last few years.
All right, amazing. So, Andrew, before we dive into Prenuvo, I would love to learn a little bit more about the industry, and then we can dive into the company. But as I was preparing for this interview, I was reading about the industry, trying to make sense about the structure, the players, the size, and my understanding is as follows: the medical imaging and radiology industry, it's a large and mature industry, growing at around 5% per year, and it's divided in two parts. Like on one side, on the one hand, you have the machines, right? The equipment manufacturers like GE, Siemens, and the likes, who focused on designing and building machines like CT scans, X-rays, MRIs, and so on. And on the other hand, you have imaging services conducted by hospitals, clinics, outpatient centers, and so on. So is that kind of accurate? Is that the best way to describe the industry? And more importantly, what inspired you to focus on this field?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much how it works. Whenever someone goes, let's say, in for any type of imaging, and that could be most like in the US diagnostic imaging. So you might have, for example, had a car accident and had concussion, and you might have a head MRI. Or you're doing screening imaging, and typically what we do whole body is not something that's routinely done in the healthcare system. A more routine screening exam might be a mammogram, for example, or a prostate MRI. You'll go to one of these outpatient facilities. Typically, they will have invested millions of dollars in having hopefully good quality equipment to acquire those images. And then probably there's a third group, which is actually quite important, which are radiologists. And these are the people that take the images that are acquired in those service businesses and turn that into medical insights for folks. And unfortunately, that third group, we have something of a shortage in the US and around the world. I think a lot of people who might otherwise think about a career in radiology are a bit concerned that it will be taken over by AI one day. And so, just as demand has been growing for imaging, the supply of radiologists has been sort of pretty stable, and those folks therefore have an increasingly larger voice in how radiology is delivered in the US.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are sort of the three pieces. hardware, the imaging clinics, and then I think the talent, the folks that actually turn that into medical insights.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. As I was reading about the industry, I came across a number of trends. Some of these trends in the industry, I think they are positive. Some other trends, I, categorize them under like negative trends, and a couple of others that I didn't know where to place. So I'm going to go through some of this, and please, share your comments, insights, or anything on this. So the first positive trend that I see is a shift to outpatient care, and what I learned is that around 40% of all imaging volume of these scans now it's happening in outpatient centers and not necessarily in a hospital setting. So I wanted to ask you like why is that happening, and is it primarily cost? How much cheaper is to do in an outpatient setting versus a hospital? Like what's changing?
Well, I'll do my best to answer the question. I'm not an expert in sort of how the sort of insides of the health insurance system work, but I can tell you this. It is much less expensive for insurance for you to be imaged in an outpatient center if you're doing an insurance procedure. If you are doing cash pay, let's say you're a private pay person who just wanted to pay for an MRI, it's much less expensive for you also to get it done in an outpatient center. What we find in the health system is these big academic hospital groups have a lot of purchasing power with insurance companies. So, if a large health system says to an insurance company, hey, if you don't accept this high price, we won't be on your insurance. And that insurance all of a sudden becomes non-viable. So they have a lot of pricing power. And one of the ways in which they extract, really rents with that pricing power is in the cost of imaging. So the insurance cost of an MRI scan in a academic center could be something like $20,000.
Wow.
The cash out of pocket cost in an outpatient facility might be $500. So that's like the difference in, how the prices shake out. And someone is paying at the end of the day, whether it's the consumer or whether it's, directly, or whether it's an insurance company, and then the employer's paying. And then, we're paying that because we have to pay more money for our goods and services when we go out and buy things. So eventually we're paying one way or the other. And these outpatient facilities tend to be a lot cheaper because they don't have that same sort of pricing power that the large health systems do.
Right. The other trend, and you already touched on this, it's you were talking about AI as well in this sector, and one of the things that caught my eye is the kind of AI diagnostic revolution, and in particular, there are over 500 FDA cleared AI tools in radiology as of 2023. That was a shocking number, and I wanted to ask you, like, how real is this? And what are the biggest innovations in your opinion in this space?
It's very real and it's happening. We even at Prenuvo, I have a quite large team that's building AI models to help our radiologists become more efficient and to help improve the accuracy of the readings that we do. And I have models that are we're researching models across maybe 50 different regions of the body, and that's just one company. Now, there's a difference between what you're researching and what's available because you have to go through an FDA process and that takes time. But everyone is working on AI in the medical imaging space, and it will, over time, play an increasing role in the radiology that gets done, 100%.
Right. What about the one of the not so positive in a way? It's the payer mix and the reimbursement models, particularly in the U.S. And my understanding, it's Prenuvo, it's more out of pocket. Maybe I'm wrong, but what's happening with the payers and the reimbursement in the reimbursement market for people that are trying to get an MRI? Like, what can you share about that? What can we learn?
Well, so for a regular diagnostic MRI, oftentimes it can be quite difficult to get authorization. So we have a lot of patients that come to us and they say, hey, I have had a bad back. I have this pain in my back for like a year, and my insurance company will not reimburse me, and they'll only allow me to get MRI if I'm willing to pay $1,000 out of pocket. And so they come to us and say, well, if I'm anyhow going to have to pay $1,000, why not pay a bit more and get the entire body? Right. So it is a lot harder for people to get authorization, because imaging is an expensive cost to an insurance company. And then in the context of screening, very few insurance companies cover any sort of screening, image-based health screenings. And we're working hard to change that, but that's the current status quo.
Right. So if I'm understanding correctly, there's a big difference between screening and diagnosis, correct? Yeah. Okay, sounds good.
So and it comes back to this reactive healthcare system that we have. So the way we practice medicine in the Western world in particular, and every country is a bit different, but they're all pretty similar in this regard, is we generally assume that you're healthy if you don't have any symptoms. So the trigger for authorization for a lot of medical procedures and tests is that you present with some sort of clinical symptoms. It doesn't matter that we understand that underneath the skin, disease can be, cancer can be growing, or disease can be slowly advancing. If there's not a symptom, there's not really a trigger for a diagnostic procedure. And that's particularly true in the imaging space.
Right. You touched on the workforce shortages, the need for specialized staff, in this field, especially radiologists and even, technologists, to run the machine. How is Prenuvo and you are thinking about this supply-demand imbalance? How can you solve something like this?
Well, we can't solve it for the industry. All I can say is it's not been a problem for Prenuvo. We've hired probably more radiologists than many other groups in the last year, and we've been able to do that because we offer radiologists something that the traditional healthcare system does not, which is the real possibility to change outcomes for patients based on the readings that they do. So a lot of physicians, they become doctors because they want to help people. Mm-hmm. But again, because a lot of imaging is done quite late in the sort of stage of advancement of disease, a lot of times a radiologist that might be reading MRI images is reading, they're not finding stage 1 cancer, they're trying to figure out where a cancer has metastasized to.
Yes.
And I mean, you can do a good job of that or a bad job of that, but probably neither job is going to meaningfully make a difference for the life of that person.
Right.
And so radiologists are really excited about Prenuvo because for the first time now, they're able to apply their skills against patients that might be asymptomatic, but still with very early stage disease. And their readings can, make a difference, life and death difference for our patients and help patients focus on getting insights to make their lives better.
Right. And I can say, I can share from my own experience when I did my Prenuvo scan, that one of the things that I found most fascinating, it's when I got my report, the user experience was very interesting, very interactive. The images were dynamic. The first time that I've seen an MRI report in such a way. So that was fascinating. But to me, the highest point of my experience with Prenuvo was the interaction with the radiologist. When I had the consultation with the radiologist, and he walked me through the whole report, and that person was very professional, but at the same time, he was able to explain everything that my report was saying in very simple terms. So, to me, I've done a few MRIs in my life, and I can say that this is the first time where I felt a very different experience.
They don't always start that way, to be honest. We have to sort of a lot of radiologists do like to use very big words. So we spent quite some time helping them sort of understand the audience that they're speaking to and really break it down in a way that's very actionable for people. So it's another big difference between Prenuvo and traditional radiology. The traditional radiologist, their audience is the physician that's ordering the test. Mm-hmm. For us, this is kind of in some ways like primary care radiology. So we're taking these this incredible technology and we're applying it in a primary care setting. So we need our radiologists to be able to communicate with patients the same way a primary care physician might communicate with their patients, which is very different.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, you're touching on my next question, which is, so the way I see it is like Prenuvo is bringing medical imaging to consumers, like more focused on prevention and like almost like consumerism of medical imaging. So that was going to be my next question, which is like what brings, like who is really the decision maker? Is what my understanding is that it's not physician led, it's consumer led. People that are health conscious, and then they really want to screen for prevention and be kind of the CEO of their own health instead of being led by a physician. Yeah. Is that accurate, or is there also a scenario where physicians are leading and referring patients to Prenuvo as well?
It's both. In some ways, when you build a company that is providing a new category, particularly a medical service, it's more of a journey than a choice. So consumers are the earliest adopters of something new. And so when we started, we definitely focused in on consumers, and we got a lot of consumers come in and get scans. Now, most of those consumers have physicians. So we produce a medical report and we send that report also to the physician of that patient. And that gives us an opportunity to start interacting with them too. They get some more understanding about what we do. They start referring us patients. Over time, we've now started to talk to employers who makes decisions about what employers decide to cover or not cover in their insurance plans is often a committee of physicians. So as we brought more consumers in, more physicians became aware of us. The more physicians became aware of us, the more employers felt comfortable providing these as a benefit for their employees. So that's a bit the journey. And the last step of that journey is the more employers cover us, the more insurance companies get exposure to us, because the employers pay the bills, but the insurance companies administer the plans. Then we hope insurance companies will get comfortable with the notion that these should be offered more broadly, because overall it saves costs from the healthcare system.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes total sense. Saves costs, long term. And my understanding is that it makes most sense with self-insured employers, right? Because they are really investing in their people, in their employees for the long term, as opposed to the other kind of commercial plans that might be changed.
Well, it's interesting. One difference, one challenge in preventive health is that typically when you change employers, you might change insurance plans.
Right.
And so in the US, there's sort of a structural disincentive to invest in preventative health, because I'm your insurance company right now. I'm going to pay for a bunch of tests, but if you change jobs tomorrow, some other insurance company will take advantage of the thing that I paid for. Mm-hmm. So that's the real structural problem in the US. So what we're actually finding, where we're finding traction, is in perhaps less usual sort of channels. Most benefits, they roll out at these big tech companies in the Silicon Valley, and they have, access to all these crazy things. What we're finding traction are in employers that have very loyal employee bases. They might be unionized. They have high occupational risk of cancer and disease. Some of them, like firefighters, even after you retire, the firefighting groups continue to pay for your insurance until you die. So it's a really cool benefit for a part of America that doesn't normally get sort of cutting edge benefits.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. Total sense. And going back to physicians, as you start with consumers, you've been expanding and interacting with physicians. Who is the ideal physician? Is it only the primary care physician? Do you also work with kind of concierge medicine or other type of specialties?
It tends to be primary care, but there's also primary care concierge. So some of those physicians, well, let me start again. It depends why someone is coming in. We have people coming really for three reasons. One is they really want to stay ahead of their health. This maybe describes you. I'm into this movement. I want to do various wellness and health interventions so they can live a longer and healthy life. That's the first group.
Yep.
And those folks are, the types of physicians that they work with tend to be very longevity-focused physicians.
Right.
The second group of people are people that might have had cancer and they've been given an all clear, and there's no imaging usually that's done afterwards to check. And those people are always looking over their shoulder, or they have a strong family history of cancer or aneurysms or chronic disease. And for them, not being screened causes them anxiety. These folks might come in through regular primary care, not necessarily concierge primary care. And then the third category are people that actually have symptoms. They might have migraines or abdominal pain or something. Like, it's very common for women to have abdominal pain and not quite know whether it's normal. And they finally get the courage to tell themselves, hey, this is not a normal sort of like period-related pain. This is something different. And then they go to the doctors and they might get ignored by the physician. The physician may normalize that. And all the time, these people are, really concerned about what they might have. So they'll come to us direct to sort of get an answer faster that either, allows us to diagnose things earlier so that they can get treatment more quickly, or, gives them peace of mind that the sort of like their worst fears weren't materialized.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That was going to be actually one of my questions, but you already laid it out perfectly. And I think that I belong on the first bucket that you described. I'm just interested about my health and wellness and proactive and so on. Why MRI scan? Why an MRI scan versus other imaging modalities? Is it because of accuracy? Is it because that's the right machine to be able to do it one time and you're able to screen the whole body? What do you think about MRI?
Well, you have, what are the alternatives? You have CT, you have maybe ultrasound, you have MRI, and that's basically it. And of those three modalities, MRI is universally understood to be the best for imaging the soft tissue. And what I mean by soft tissue is the organs of the body. And so if you're worried about cancer or disease, that's where most of it ends up. People tried to do whole body imaging with CT in the US probably 30 years ago. You can still get it in certain places, but it involves radiation. It's not particularly accurate. And the only advantage of CT is it's very fast. The challenge with MRI has always been it's very slow to image people. And the cost of the procedure is a function of the time in the machine. And so one of the innovations that we made at Prenuvo was we took something that ordinarily would take 3 hours, and we were able to compress it down to about 45 minutes using incredible hardware and image acquisition software and AI. And that really sort of enabled the product, because no one wanted to pay for a 3-hour MRI, and certainly no one wanted to lie in that tube for 3 hours. So without speeding this up, the product wouldn't have ever existed. And now, now it does. It sort of has made this use case of preventative imaging possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what's the role of a biopsy, of a liquid biopsy? Is that like a second step? Like once you do an MRI, and if you identify something, then you do a liquid biopsy, or can it be, like a competitor, if you will?
It's more of a complement than a competitor. They're very different approaches. With a liquid biopsy, you tend to have a more specific test at the cost of sensitivity. What do I mean by this? I mean that if the test is positive for cancer, you very likely have cancer, but the tests are more likely to miss early stage cancer, so stage 1 and stage 2 cancer. With imaging, you're much more sensitive to early stage cancer because you can see the lesion. Mm-hmm. But when you see a lesion, you have less certainty that it's cancer than you would with a liquid biopsy. Does that make sense? So you get more sensitivity, but maybe more false positives. With a liquid biopsy, you get fewer false positives, but way less sensitivity. So doing these two tests together is really helpful if they both agree. So if both of them are negative, the chances that you have cancer is almost zero. If both of them are positive, the chances that you have cancer is almost 100%. Unfortunately, the most likely outcome would be for an early cancer, we would see it and the liquid biopsies wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. But those tests are evolving. I think they're great tests, and I'm sure they'll only get better. But just some cancers don't shed enough genetic material for them to be picked up at an early stage with those tests.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. It's complementary. So let's talk a little bit more about Prenuvo. And so you started the company with your core offering, and my understanding is that now you have a new offering called Prenuvo Enhanced. So can you please walk us through kind of how the value prop has evolved over time?
Yeah, it's really evolved not necessarily as a function of market demand. I think people always wanted something like an enhanced product, but more as a function of just our ability to deliver a really high quality clinical product to our customers. So for the first 5 years of the company, we were really focused on how do we take this core imaging exam and sort of scale it up and maintain and improve image quality as we do so. And that took a lot of effort for us as a company. We scaled from 1 radiologist now to 80. We went from, not having any real sub radiology specialties in the organization to having like a head of body and a head of neuro and so on, and have that team really work together in a very sort of collaborative community sense to really help each other do an even better job. We're now at that point where we feel like we've nailed that, we've got it dialed, and we can start to expand the range of offerings that we're able to offer our patients. And the first thing we wanted to add was blood. And the main reason for that was simple. We think that imaging can provide sort of about a 90% picture of what's going on with your health. If you only did one test, we don't believe there's a more comprehensive test than what we do at Prenuvo. When we add blood, we think that we can get that to about 97, 98%.
Wow.
Blood helps us in 2 ways. The first way is there are some conditions that we can more easily check with blood or find earlier with blood than we can with imaging. So obviously, we can't with imaging figure out whether you have diabetes, but you can with a blood test. In the field of cancer, we can't see leukemia at stage 1. With imaging, we only see it at stage 3. With a blood test, you get a pretty good signal of it, at a much earlier stage. And then when we add blood to the radiology that we do, it can take what is already a very medically accurate exam and make it even more accurate, because the blood numbers might help us differentiate between 2 different possibilities of 2 different diseases when we see something inside your body. So for example, if we see a lesion in your thyroid or pituitary gland, and we have information about your hormonal biomarkers, that helps us understand what that lesion is doing. Is it active? Is it secreting hormones or not? And it might change the diagnosis that the radiologist makes. So that's why we layered on blood. And then we're just starting to deepen our deepen what we can offer using imaging as well. So we added a much more advanced neuro assessment where we look at the actual blood flow through the brain, which really no one is doing other than using injecting radioactive traces into your bloodstream. We're able to do that without any contrast being injected at all. And that blood flow starts to tell us, especially in the extremities where it might be compromised. And where it's compromised, that tends to be in the areas of the body, the areas of the brain where you start to see atrophy from dementia. So the earlier that we can pick up these blood flow issues, the earlier we can perhaps address them with lifestyle and medication, and maybe avoid someone going into, cognitive decline and dementia later in life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I truly believe that's like cutting edge, like combining the different modalities and samples, and adding blood. I think it's a great idea. So congrats. I would love to see eventually, maybe a couple of years down the road, that you guys also do stool and saliva to understand the gut microbiome and the oral microbiome and everything that is going through the tube. But also you touched on something super important about neurocognitive conditions, and Alzheimer's, dementia. It's one of the areas where big pharma has failed. Lots of R&D dollars have gone into developing new drugs, and the status quo hasn't changed a lot. And my understanding is that if you can do what you're saying, about how to measure the flow in the brain, and you are able to prevent and do certain things, you are going to be able to either delay or eradicate, potential issues down the line.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I even have I have a theory that, particularly with dementia, I mean, there has been so many drugs that have been developed and failed. Tens of billions of dollars has been spent on this space, and we've only had very modest success. And one theory I have is perhaps that the problem wasn't the drug. The problem was we never really had a chance to administer it against patients that were still in like a preclinical stage. So if you can start to identify maybe some of these folks that, a lot earlier than symptoms present, maybe the drugs become more effective. Because, I think there's one thing we've learned from having done this imaging for over 100,000 people is that the sort of early stages of disease can often be visible on imaging 10, 20 years before you even present with symptoms.
Right.
So the window of detection is pretty wide, and it may well be that some of these drugs, when applied earlier to cancers or to dementia or to inflammatory conditions or to chronic conditions like chronic kidney disease or chronic liver disease. Well, if we could apply them against the non-chronic versions of those diseases, maybe we could have more breakthroughs on the pharma side too.
Absolutely. That's a super exciting space, and a company like Prenuvo could be the catalyst to enhance personalized medicine as well. So yeah, I'm very, very excited about that, and I would love to see Prenuvo leading the way in that front. Regarding pricing, how could you explain a little bit about like how did you come up with the price for a Prenuvo scan? How does it compare to other similar products? And I know that you have prevention versus non-prevention and all of that, but walk us through your thinking.
We have, if I'm being totally honest, we haven't thought a lot about price. We've had a scan that is $2,500. It was $2,500 in 2009. It's $2,500 in 2025. So it's effectively probably 60 or 70% cheaper now than it was back then. But we haven't really changed the price at all. We've just found ways to be more efficient, even as sort of some of the underlying costs have grown. Price is always an interesting one for me. I am one of those annoying people who ask a lot of why questions. And so I will often have friends that come up to me and they'll be like, oh, that Prenuvo account is pretty good. It's a little bit expensive. And I know these people can afford it. And if you ask enough why questions, what you end up discovering is that price maybe is a convenient excuse for a lot of folks. But, the real, I would say, hesitation is that people don't always want to know what's going on with their health. Mm-hmm. And so, my theory is probably the number of people that can afford it but don't want to know is probably 10 times larger than the people that want to know that can't afford it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is that the main reason why some people decide not to do an MRI scan? Like they are afraid of what they can find out?
I think people tell themselves a lot of things, and we are masters at sort of like self-deception, right? So we'll tell ourselves, oh, it's too expensive, or we'll tell ourselves it's, such and such doctor said something bad about, that doesn't believe in these things. So that's great. Someone has got some air cover, so I don't have to do it. Or I'm too busy. I'm going to do it next month, not this month. I mean, there's just lots of reasons. But fundamentally, I think it boils down to just people being afraid. And I want to be really clear about one thing, because this is something I'm really passionate about. I don't think people are afraid because there's anything wrong or defective with them. I think people are afraid because the healthcare system has conditioned us that way. Because if every story you hear about cancer is late stage or terminal, if every disease that you hear about is chronic, if the stories aren't we found everything early and everything's great, why on earth would you want to look for something? Mm-hmm. So right. I think like my biggest challenge, the thing I think about the most is the psychology of, wanting to know. And how do we overcome this conditioning that the reactive healthcare system has sort of created in us? Because it's a hugely limiting sort of barrier that's standing between us and having clarity about our health and therefore being able to live a healthier life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely, it's conditioning, as you said, conditioning over time, and also lack of education. Because yes, there's a stigma about cancer means death, but cancer has many different stages, right? So if you are able to, if you're lucky to find that you have very early stage cancer, then there is it's curable, and fixable, and all of that. So I would agree with you. I think that the challenge or the opportunity that a company like yours, like Prenuvo, has, it's in educating the kind of the masses.
Yeah, and the flip side, by the way, is also I think, really interesting, which is we spend, whether we like it or not, sometimes subconsciously, sometimes consciously, we actually spend a lot of time worried about our health. And to be able to be free from that, I think is a wonderful thing. So when people ask us, what is Prenuvo? The easy answer is, well, we detect things early. But I think the more interesting and complex answer is, we actually, in the context of putting you in charge of your health, we give you peace of mind. We give you sort of freedom from that voice. That can cause us a lot of unhappiness through not knowing. And we found when we survey people that do scans, I think it's 92% of people, or something north of 90% of people, tell us that they have better peace of mind after the scan. And when you ask them why, a good number of those is because you gave me an all clear. But also a lot of them have greater peace of mind because we gave them clarity, even if they had problems. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some people, very infrequently, we're giving them bad news. Here's a cancer here that you need to do something about. So you have an aneurysm, you need to go get some surgery. And they still have better peace of mind because they know something about their health that they didn't know before. But it's very hard. It's a very difficult thing to explain to people. How do you explain? You did the scan, Rodrigo. Sell me on peace of mind. Describe what peace of mind feels like without using the words peace of mind.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, in my case, I did the scan. I've been having some negative internal chatter in my mind over the last couple of years, just because now I'm in my 40s, and as I start aging, I start getting more concerned about my age. And I did the scan, and I really enjoyed the experience on the consultation and looking at the charts and the images and all of that. And luckily my scan was clean. There were a few minor things that the radiologist told me that just nothing major. Just it's you don't have to do anything about this right now. When you come back in a year, you just have to keep on checking this, but nothing to do right now. For me, I was like, oh, great. And that gave me a sense of empowerment and additional strength in my life to be able to continue to focus on the things that matter in life, and be able to lower that inner dialogue that sometimes goes on inside my mind.
Yeah.
Too many words to say the peace of mind.
It's difficult, right? That's sort of like the marketing campaign. We need a good executive to figure out how to describe that,
A good copywriter, yeah, absolutely. Hey, Andrew, I have another question that I have around, and this is kind of well known, at least to some people in the medical community, but my understanding is that the medical society doesn't currently fully endorse a full body, whole body MRI scan, and how the more important question is how are you working with the medical community, and what are you and others in the industry doing to have more peer-reviewed scientific clinical evidence, RCT, randomized controlled trials? Is there anything else that you and others in the industry are doing to kind of gain this endorsement and full adoption, if you will?
We do a lot of active research. So we started publishing quite a bit. We're running a prospective 100,000 person trial actually in Massachusetts, where we're imaging a lot of sort of social equity patients so that we can pull together a cohort of people that are representative of the US population. And we're following the health of these patients. So the goal of that trial is to investigate how useful these techniques are in predicting clinically significant disease at 1 year. And so we image patients and then we reach out to them again a year and we give them a very big medical survey and we learn what has come up that about their health that maybe was not in the exam. And then what was in the exam that didn't end up being an issue for their health. And the goal here is to really get a good sense of the efficacy of these exams, what the downstream medical costs might be, both positive and negative in the context of like more testing that might have been taken place, and perhaps medical savings through catching things early. And the plan is to publish that over the coming years, and hopefully maybe change the dialogue around these exams.
Yeah.
I do think one thing to point out, remember how we talked at the very beginning about how we had to train like the radiologist to speak to regular people?
Yep.
I think a lot of these associations are a little bit dishonest in the way that they speak to the general public, because they'll often say, we don't recommend these scans. And for the general population, the way they interpret that is that they're not good. But what they're making is a scientific sort of like statement, which is to say, what they're really saying is these scans might be incredible or might not be. We just don't yet have enough evidence to say one way or the other. But that's not what they say.
No. And I think the way you're saying it sounds more truthful or compelling, the use of words. But
so that's unfortunate, and but that's unfortunately how when they make these statements, that's what they say.
Yeah.
It's also a little bit unfortunate that a lot of people that have been speaking out against these exams, whenever we see someone speak in public against, whole body, the first thing we do is we invite them in to really understand what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And very few of those people who continue to speak out about these exams have actually bothered to even learn anything about them. And it's important, you can't generalize in this space, because whole body screening is a qualitative imaging modality. It's like heart surgery. The quality of the sort of medical service that you're getting is highly dependent on the person that's providing it. And, that's why we operate our own clinics. That's why we have our own radiologists. That's why we invest a lot of time in research on the protocols and things like this.
Absolutely.
So to speak out about this and not actually bother to want to come in and learn about the techniques and protocols that we're following strikes me as pretty disingenuous.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, the science, the technology continues to evolve, and, also the medical community needs to continue to evolve, and they will. I've been in the health space also for 20 years, and I know that, technology adoption and, takes a bit of time. So
I don't mind with the run-of-the-mill physician. I have no problems with. They're busy. Like they're not paid to stay up to date on the latest that's going on. But if you're speaking about this topic, you should be educated about the topic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me shift gears a little bit. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about product management and growth, growth strategies, from a business perspective. And let's start with, can you talk a little bit about your product development process? And I know that at the beginning, you told me the story when we met that you met a physician or a scientist. I think it was Canada or in the US, where you saw a full body MRI and you were very intrigued and inspired to build a new product. So walk us through that kind of how you build the product, and also I wanted to ask you about when did you know you had product market fit, and what was your definition of product market fit?
Yeah, so they're both great questions. I actually would go back a little bit further, which is, I had this realization one day. For sure I was in my 40s, so probably there was some flavor of midlife crisis to it. But I had taken my car in for a service in some new sort of car shop, and they had this like incredible software where after I picked up my car, they gave me this like 30-page report, and I went through every single component in my car, had pictures of pretty much everything. Now my car was asymptomatic at the time when I took it in. But they're like, here's what, they're like, you're leaking oil here. This thing is wearing it down. You probably should replace this. The way you're driving your car, which is clearly badly, is wearing the brakes this way or the clutch that way. And it was like the most detailed report I've ever seen in my car. And I remember having this moment where I thought to myself, isn't that stupid that, like I know more about my car than I know about the inside of my body now.
That's a great story.
And then I started to research, and it's true. I mean, we spend $120 billion a year on maintaining our cars, the vehicle that drives our body around. And we spend $40 billion on preventative screening of our bodies, the vehicle that drives our brain around. So if my car breaks down, I can buy a new car. If my body breaks down, I'm pretty much done. So it just felt like it was just, the way that we are sort of allocating resources here is silly. So I went searching for answers, and I found a clinic that was doing a very earlier version of what we now do at Prenuvo. And, I did the scan and I got great piece. I had a similar experience to what you had. And then I decided to not leave. I sort of stayed there. I staked out this place for like 6 months. And every patient that went there, I asked them, hey, would you mind if I like sat in on your consult? And just sort of, and I ended up sitting in on about 100, 200 of these things. And you asked a question about when did I know that there was product market fit? For this business in particular, it was very early. Because at the end of those consults, about 1 in every 2 of those people hugged the radiologist. Now, have you ever hugged a medical provider in your entire life? Because I can tell you my answer is no, never. I've never had this desire. But that was just how profound this information was for these people that were, this very comprehensive information was for these people that were receiving. And again, the hugs came whether you had nothing going on or whether you had cancer. It was really being treated as an equal and having complete knowledge and feeling like for the first time in your life, you can engage with the health system sort of as like an equal participant. Mm-hmm. So this is one of these companies, unusually, where product market fit came really far. It's my 5th company. I know how horribly frustrating it is to not have to not know whether all the effort you're putting in is going to actually yield a result. In this case, that was never a problem. The fit was there from day one. The challenge was figuring out how to scale it and convince investors to invest.
Right. That's a different challenge.
Yeah.
What about so once you had a product that you found you refined over time, what was your initial go-to-market strategy? You had some capital, you were going to roll it out in the US. So how did you come up with your initial go-to-market strategy, and how has it evolved over time?
Yeah, it's evolved a lot, but at the core, it's been pretty consistent. When you are building something new that people don't know that they need, basically all your demand is latent. And what do I mean by latent demand? It's when you go to a party or something or a dinner and people ask you what you do, and I say, I work at this thing called Prenuvo, and they're like, what's that? And you say, well, we screen for blah, 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 blah. And the answer is, that's great. I didn't know that would exist. I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
That's latent demand. They don't even know the category exists. And the challenge with a latent demand, sort of a company that's going after latent demand, is just very expensive to acquire customers. Because you can't do what's called bottom of funnel marketing. You have to do a lot of top of funnel marketing. You're marketing to people that don't know you exist. You can't just buy whole body MRI sort of keywords on Google because no one's typing that search in.
Right.
And because it's so expensive, growing inorganically is just sort of like so cost prohibitive that that it's really hard. And so we decided from the very beginning that we wanted to grow organically. And if you want to grow organically, you have to really focus on just delivering an incredible product. And that has been the focus from the very beginning. So about now, 9 in every 10 people that come in because they've heard about us through a family member or a friend or a colleague or so on. And then as we started to expand, we got people in who had like really big reaches. You know, we had quite famous people that were happy to share because they had a great experience, and they weren't just sharing with like their 10 best friends. They were sharing with like an audience of 1 million people. So that sort of like organic acquisition really expanded quite well as we kept growing. But at the core of it, there's sort of no shortcuts. I mean, people do it because they have a great experience themselves and they want to share it with other people because it might save lives.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for sharing that. And I've had similar experiences where I've had to develop a new category, a new market, and I fully understand what you're saying. You know, the challenges of educating a new market. You know, telling people what it's all about. You know, you don't have it's not like saying, hey, you know, this is Coke and now this is Pepsi, you know, with a different flavor. You know, it's like you have to build it on your own, and it's definitely expensive and it takes time. So because it takes time to build a market, then you also have to make sure that your unit economics make sense, right?
Or you're going to spend billions of dollars. I mean, there are companies that have done it, just spending billions and billions of dollars, but that, I guess I'm not wired for that type of company. I would rather have, you know, show up at work every day and not feel like, you know, the company is sort of like default dead. I would rather it be sort of default alive by knowing that if I don't do any marketing tomorrow, I'm still going to get new patients come through the door.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also had a question about geographic focus. You know, you have 17 clinics or so across the U.S. What has been your criteria for choosing new locations? What kind of do you do? Like, you know, do you hire consultants who specialized in, like, you know, like people that help McDonald's or Starbucks to choose a location and open up a new location? What has been your experience? What can you share about that?
We sort of triangulate 2 approaches. The first is that we have something of a homegrown model. It's in Excel, so it's not so crazy, where we have a lot of zip code level data across the US, and this is income data and wealth data, and also some sort of non-monetary indicators like propensity to exercise, propensity to eat well, organic food, things like this. And we build by zip code, sort of like a sort of like an understanding of what might be the addressable market in that zip code. And then when we put down a clinic, it's not like Starbucks. People drive a long way to come get a scan. They can drive an hour or 2. So we have sort of like a process of sort of a decay. You know, if you live next door to the clinic and you have high propensity, you're going to come in. If you live an hour away and you have high propensity, you're maybe less likely to come in. So we can sort of figure out what the addressable market is around a certain location, and we use that really to sort of inform where we want to create locations. And then we triangulate that by looking at adjacent businesses. So we look at things like, you know, where are the Apple stores? Where are the Equinox or Lifetime Fitness gyms? You know, where are the Whole Food, you know, supermarkets? And that oftentimes, once we pick the city, that helps us understand which sort of region within a sort of city area makes the most sense to put the clinic.
Yeah, makes total sense. I want to switch gears to the final part of the interview, and so I have 2 more questions before we go. And I know that you are a serial entrepreneur. You know, this is your 5th company. You have accomplished great things, and a lot of us would love to learn from you. So you know, the first question that I wanted to ask you is, like, as a serial entrepreneur, like, what has been your process, your approach for building products, companies? Like, walk us through some of your key takeaways. And related to that, like, how do you come up with great ideas and insights to say, like, if I were to create a new company, this would be kind of my process. This would be some of the key insights that I would take with me to define that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I would answer them in reverse. How do you come up with a great idea first? Which is, I think the experience I've lived is different to the advice that a lot of people give you. A lot of people say, work on something that you're passionate about. I think passion for a space can be huge blinders sometimes, for the realities of particular markets. People tend to be passionate about the same things, which means that the economics of those markets that we're passionate about tend to be worse, and the level of competition tends to be higher. For example, a lot of people are passionate about travel. Travel is like one of the worst markets to like build a business for. The margins are horrible. The competition is really high. The noise is loud. You have to market a lot to build anything. So, so I learned kind of, by the time I arrived at my third startup, the lesson I learned that I've sort of followed ever since is I don't rely on myself to generate the idea. When I want to go and build a company, I maybe have a sense of the space, and then I just reach out to everyone that I know and tell them, hey, I want to do something. I'm interested in these two spaces. Introduce me to anyone that has problems in those areas. I want to like learn a lot. And I go out there and I see what problems are out there that haven't been solved. And I think that's, a lot of entrepreneurs are excited about the building part. And if what gets you excited is building or winning or driving revenue, you'll find that you can sort of like discover that passion no matter what the industry or problem is that you're trying to solve. But my personal experience has been when I've worked on things that are passion projects, they've been way more likely to fail.
That's a great perspective. Great perspective.
And especially if you've had a successful startup, because then you have both hubris that it was all about you and the desire to like apply that in sort of like some esoteric field that you're passionate about that actually makes no business sense. And I see this a lot. I have some investor friends that won't invest in the second company of a founder who was successful from the first one, because invariably they don't have the same filter. So that's sort of my theory about finding ideas. And then, so how do I execute? I think a lot of people spend a lot of time focusing on the vision. And I think of the vision, I do a bit of sailing from time to time. So like the vision is sort of like the destination you want to arrive at that's over the horizon. You should understand what direction it is, broadly speaking. You should be able to articulate it because you need it in your fundraising decks or when you talk to media and so on. But I don't spend that much time talking about that. That for me is like my Friday afternoon Chardonnay conversation. And then the rest of the week is trying to figure out, well, where am I going? Like, what tack am I taking? That almost is never completely in the direction of the vision, because that's upwind. I have to head off a bit in this direction, and I'm going to build some capabilities or get some revenue or whatever, and then I'm going to be able to tack back in this direction. And so it becomes this like process of like sequencing and tacking that sort of help you arrive at that vision. Of course, during that journey, you start to realize that the vision you thought you had maybe should be modified slightly, and you start heading off in a different direction. But so I spend more time thinking about what's the next step and what's the step after that, and a lot less time. People think that vision is the hard part. The vision is not the hard part. The hard part is like figuring out what the next few steps are and actually heading in that direction.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Final question. What's the right balance between skill development and team building? And what I mean by that is, you as an entrepreneur, you have a skill or you have a set of skills. Maybe you have a superpower, and if you do, please share what that is. But then on the other hand, the importance of building the right teams and being able to be surrounded by the right people. So like, what's most important? Like, how much time do you spend or have you spent over the last 10 or 15 years, like thinking, I really need to develop these skills to be a great entrepreneur, versus my skill is to really build an amazing team? Or how do you think about that?
I think I'm a work in progress. I don't think I'm particularly sometimes I don't feel particularly skilled in my job, if I'm being totally honest. I would say and I think also most entrepreneurs have a superpower, and almost all superpowers have like an evil sort of dark side to them. So I would say like my superpower is there's not a single function in a startup that I haven't done, including engineering. And that's a huge asset in the early days because, the most efficient startup is a startup with one person because you have no miscommunication inside your own brain. And if you can do everything, then, you can make a lot of progress. And as soon as you start adding a second person, now all of a sudden you have to worry about dynamics and communication, all this. So like it's a tremendous asset in the very early stages of the company. As you sort of like scale, I have 600 people now. I've got like big engineering teams and big AI teams and product teams and so on. All of a sudden that can become like a liability because, I have, a CEO that always has some information, some knowledge that's good at a function, but not as great as the people that you hired in to do it. Like you have to be really careful and focus on like giving the team space to really arrive at a much better solution than I would be able to do it myself. And I think that's always a little bit the tension, that a lot of entrepreneurs have as they sort of go from like a small company to scaling up. And I don't have the answer. I'm a work in progress. I get coaching every month. I think, which I highly recommend to any CEO because there's a lot of stuff you have to work through as you sort of grow a company.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, this has been super fun. I've enjoyed the conversation. I've learned a lot about Prenuvo and about you. Thank you for being so generous with your time. And yeah, thank you for being here.
No worries. It's been great to be here, Rodrigo.
Yeah. Until the next time, and thanks everyone for watching and listening. Thank you.